Alrighty, everybody. DSP here, and welcome back. This is part 2 of Ask the King, episode 82 for July 9th, 2020. I almost forgot what the date was. Welcome back. If you missed part 1, go check it out. It should already be on demand on the King of Hate vlogs. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on live stream, well, you're just going to have to wait a little while for that to go live later today. But I think we should jump right into the next slew of questions. So let's do that. The next question is from let's see here. Kill Bill 216. And he says, I miss 2018. We had God of War, Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed, Red Dead Redemption 2, Detroit Become Human, and more. In my opinion, games in the last year and a half have been such a letdown with a few good titles here and there. I know you would need to do research to really find the answer, but would you consider 2018 to be one of the best years for game releases in recent memory? Yes, it's weird. It's definitely weird how the game landscape works, because it seems like every 3 years or so we have a crazy good blockbuster year. Seriously, like the year that BioShock Infinite came out, I remember that year being like insanely outstanding. Like Call of Duty, I think, was great that year, and you had Assassin's Creed that year. Like that year was like so many giant high-profile releases, and they were all good. So you get to the end of the year, you're like, oh my god, you know, how am I going to narrow it down to what game of the year is this year? I have no clue. I can't figure it out. And then you end up with a year where there's like nothing. You know, like this year so far, everything's been disappointing to me. Seriously. And it just seems like this is a pattern. That you're going to get 1 year of ginormous overload of great AAA games that are all amazing. And people are like, holy shit. You know, I just can't, I don't have enough money to buy and play all these games. And then you got years where it's like, you know, I could just skip all these and it doesn't even matter. But 2018, absolutely. 2018 was a year of high highs for gaming. Well, and whatever year, I believe the year Batman Arkham Knight came out, which I believe that would have been like 2015. I think that was a really good year for gaming, if I'm remembering correctly. It's like, so it almost seems like every third year. Almost every third year is the year when things like just explode with great games. So yeah. Only Iced Coffee's given a couple subs to the channel. One to Mark McCauley and one to Tales from the Crypt. So thank you, Only Iced Coffee, for the channel support. Continuing on, Random Ron asked the following question. He says, my question is the state of fighting games in itself. The beginning of this generation felt like there was always some kind of new fighting game that was coming out. Now I barely even hear anything about fighting games, and it's starting to remind me of the pre-Street Fighter 4 days. Even if I had my issues with EVO Online, it was still a good way to get lesser-known games' attention, and even I only registered because Skullgirls was going to be on that list. Between larger fighting games getting bad reps and smaller fighting games having little attention and player bases, does it feel like we're reaching another slump when it comes to fighting games? And even if Capcom made another Street Fighter or another Marvel vs. Capcom game, can we still trust them considering their recent track record with fighting games? Yeah, it's funny because I grew up in the absolute heyday of fighting games, but I didn't really become like... I didn't try to play them competitively at a serious level until they were almost dying out. Okay? And then we had the renaissance of fighting games with Street Fighter 4, and now it almost feels like here, 10 years later, that's all over. Okay? Let's follow the history. Street Fighter 2 released in, I believe it was 1991 in Japan, and I forget if it's 91 or 92 in American arcades. And it created a whole new genre of competitive fighting games. Then you had the many versions of Street Fighter 2 combined with Mortal Kombat, combined with other game franchises that tried to compete. You had Midway, who came out with a million games like Primal Rage, War Gods, stuff like that. And then you had the Killer Instinct series. Street Fighter, of course, exploded with not only Street Fighter 2, but then the Alpha series, then Street Fighter 3, and then the Versus series. So arcades were absolutely jam-packed with fighting games, and fighting games literally drove arcades throughout the 1990s. It's the reason why our video arcades were so popular. Then, around the year 2000, it all crashed. The market kind of crashed. Not to say that the fighting games were worse, but I think maybe there was oversaturation because there was literally 3 to 4 Capcom fighting games out at the same time, while you also had Tekken, you had Virtua Fighter, you had Mortal Kombat. So you had so much going on at once that maybe there was just too much at once. And what ended up happening was Capcom had a big shift in their division after a few big failures. Like, ultimately, Capcom felt Street Fighter 3 was a big failure. They tried something different with improved graphics and a very different kind of gameplay engine. And overall, they did not sell anywhere near as many as they wanted to. Especially because the hardware was so expensive to put in a gameplay, to put into a game cabinet. And basically, Street Fighter 3 was a ginormous flop for them. They tried a few other things like Capcom vs. SNK 1 and 2. Really, the only game that was making them tons of money at the time was the Versus series, so Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2. But Capcom decided they wanted to go in a different direction. They basically kind of almost shuttered up their arcade division and started working primarily on games like Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, a different focus for the company. And so, from the years of, say, the year 2000 all the way through like 2008, 2009, Capcom really wasn't giving a shit about fighting games. The few that they released were absolutely terrible, like Capcom Fighting Jam, a game that had like only a few new sprites. Everything else was reused from other games, and the game played like shit. So when basically when consoles came out, Capcom was like, screw it, when they kind of retired their fighting game division. Now, I'm not saying the fighting games died out completely. Mortal Kombat turned primarily into a console-based experience that really wasn't played competitively anymore. It was more like just messing around with gory stuff at home. Tekken remained competitive, but because of the decline of arcades and because of the decline of major fighting games available, Tekken really didn't break into the mainstream as a ginormous thing like Street Fighter ever did. And so there was basically, to maintain competitive fighting games in the 2000s, it was a grassroots movement. It was just people who absolutely loved fighting games and playing them at a competitive level who did these little homegrown tournaments. It wasn't about backing from companies and sponsorships, and Capcom never sponsored a tournament, but we call them the Big Four, okay? We call Super Turbo, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Capcom vs. SNK 2, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. Those were the Big Four Capcom tournaments that at a major fighting game tournament you would hold. Then you would have things like Tekken, whatever the latest Tekken game was, if there was a new Virtua Fighter available on a console, and then maybe a few other games like Guilty Gear and stuff crammed in there. That was a major fighting game tournament back then. But no exaggeration, from like the year 2000, 2001, all the way to 2009 with Street Fighter 4, there were no new Capcom fighting games at all. So it was very, very lackluster. There were some ports. They tried to port the games and stuff, but there was never really mainstream appeal. So that was really a dead time for games. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, after like almost a decade, Capcom decides they want to rejuvenate the Street Fighter series with the first numbered entry in Street Fighter in over 8 years with Street Fighter 4. Modernized graphics, new gameplay mechanics, basically recreating Street Fighter from the ground up, having some familiar feelings from previous Street Fighter games, but also having new elements to it. Street Fighter 4 completely exploded with popularity when it released and invigorated the entire gaming genre. In fact, it prompted games franchises like Mortal Kombat to reinvent themselves and become more serious and more competitive again after, you know, a decade of kind of just being a silly mess around game that you would do at home, but there was really no competitive play for it. All of a sudden, Mortal Kombat comes back. Tekken, ginormous in a big way. You're right, and that was around 2009, so that was about 11 years ago. And of course, we had all the versions of Street Fighter 4. That lasted, what, a good 4 or 5 years. We had the Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And then Capcom started to lose their way with stuff like what was it? Street Fighter Cross Tekken. And then, I hate to say it, with Street Fighter 5 being such a flop at launch and then eventually gaining traction over the years, primarily because of hardcore fighting game community support. Let's be honest here. Is Street Fighter 5 as popular as it is because it's a good game, or is it because it's the only game from Capcom that they really promote and do any kind of updates to? You see what I'm saying? Like, outside of Street Fighter 5, what else is there? Capcom hasn't put out a new fighting game at all. So because of that, that's what people have to play, so it remains the top game from Capcom for fighters, despite the fact that, honestly, we could go for something better, right? So it really feels to me like, you're right. Street Fighter 5 has now been out. I mean, the beta came out in 2015. The full game came out in early 2016? So the game's been out for over 4.5 years, and we just get season after season, tweak after tweak. Enough is enough. We need something new. You know what I mean? Like, we need a new game to reinvigorate the fighting game community, and Capcom doesn't seem very eager to do it. They just want to keep milking the same cow and beating the same dead horse, despite the fact that I've always hated the game, and a lot of people in the competitive fighting game community basically said they didn't like Street Fighter 5, and even though it does have a vibrant community of competitive players, it's probably not for the right reasons. You know what I mean? Now, other franchises have continued on. Tekken continued on with new iterations. We had the whole Dragon Ball Fighters, right? Oh my God, Dragon Ball Fighters, ginormously popular at the time. But now look at the sharp decline. Dragon Ball Fighters is nowhere near as popular as it was over about 2.5 years ago. In fact, you barely ever hear it even talked about anymore, right? And this is a major problem with fighting games now. It seems like they've come out, there's giant hype behind them for a little bit, and then they just kind of fizzle out. It didn't used to be like that. Like I said, we played the big four Capcom games from the year 2000 to 2009. You know what I mean? We put 9 years. Now, what other fighting game has longevity for 9 years in the modern era? Probably none, right? I mean, that's a good point. Like, look at Dead or Alive 6, where no one even played it. The game was an utter failure and flopped completely. Yeah, things just aren't doing so well for fighting games, in my opinion. Mortal Kombat 11 came out, people played it competitively, and then kind of were like, meh. And you know what I mean? Like, that's what's happening with these games. They're getting popularity for a very limited time, and then they kind of die out. So, I actually agree with you here. Random Ron. I think that fighting games are kind of at a point where, is it as bad as it was in the mid to late 2000s? No, we're not there yet. But it certainly feels like we're getting there. Like, since we haven't had anything new from Capcom in 5 years, okay, Tekken is taking forever to release new games, right? Mortal Kombat and Injustice are continuing on from NetherRealm, but they kind of fizzle out competitively after a very short period of time. So, in reality, what do we really have that's really, you know, mainstream, supporting the fighting game community's vibrance and you know, nothing. Nothing. It's the very, again, in 2009 you had Street Fighter 4, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, all these new versions of Street Fighter 4, and then a new version of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, multiple versions of, remember, there was a mainstream Tekken and then Tekken Tag Tournament 2, plus Dead or Alive came back, plus Mortal Kombat had a reboot. It was like, wow, the fighting game renaissance, and it's over. In my opinion, we're getting back to stagnation. And is it because Capcom has moved on and said, we want to focus on Resident Evil, and we want to focus on Devil May Cry, and we want to focus on other franchises again? Maybe. Maybe they realize we could just remake old games with modernized graphics and gameplay mechanics that it's not as bad or as difficult to develop as, say, a new fighting game from the ground up or whatever, and we can make a ton of money doing that, so why are we going to make Street Fighter 6 right now? You see? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems to me like fighting games have completely slowed down and no one really cares that much about them. Even releases like the Samurai Showdown game that came out last year, outside of the competitive fighting game community that were like foaming at the mouth for a new fighting game, it didn't get any mainstream appeal at all. I never played it. I never heard of anyone really wanting me to play it. So, I agree with you, Random Ron. I think what would it take for us to get out of this rut? Capcom needs to focus on fighting games again. In regards to, like, they have to make a new Street Fighter, for sure. It has to play better than Street Fighter V, which plays terribly. And they need to, I would say, you know, the Versus series or something new. We have to get, like, 2 new fighting games from Capcom, and that might reinvigorate everyone else to start making fighting games again. I don't know. Zach the Guy asks, out of the many Resident Evil games that you have played, what would be your top 3, and is there one that you actually really hate? I would say, if you look at every Resident Evil game ever, Resident Evil 1 will always be my favorite. It's the one that actually, for me, started survival horror. Like, I couldn't tell you any mainstream survival horror games before Resident Evil. That one just, it brought survival horror into the mainstream with the way that it handled it, like almost like a cheesy B-movie, but it had like all these horror movie cliches and things in it. It was the first game that I played that I actually legitimately felt scared. So that game I will always hold up in regard as the best survival horror game and the best Resident Evil ever. After that, I would argue Resident Evil 2 Remake. Probably the best in the entire franchise, because it's got very, very challenging gameplay elements, especially if you play it on the hardcore difficulty like I did. But it's got good variety of enemies, it's got great gameplay mechanics, it's got replayability with the 2 sides you play with the 2 different characters. It's just insanely well done. Probably one of, if not the best survival horror game that I've played. It's just that good. And then, you know, then after that, it kind of becomes, I don't know, maybe Resident Evil 4, you know, was really, really good when I remember playing it. I would say the one I don't like the most is Resident Evil 3. I feel Resident Evil 3 is too short to be a mainstream survival horror game. There's really no replayability after you play it once. There's no reason to go back and play it again. There's no scenario B. It has really annoying gameplay elements in it. Now, the remake actually did away with some of those elements. Like, for example, a time segment where you're rushing through zombies, and if you shoot wrong, you blow up a barrel that insta-kills everybody. That's not even in the game. They improved the game to the point where all that stuff was removed. But I would say original Resident Evil 3, the original version, is probably my least liked Resident Evil game in the whole franchise. Okay. Continuing on. Oh, we're only like not even 20 minutes into this part. We got a lot of time. All right, the next question is from Blanca Balls, and he asks the following. So, I've been asking various questions pertaining to your fighting game community history, such as playing in tournaments and returning to EVO in the future for any Street Fighter game. With your recent, more extensive comments on EVO and the developments surrounding the tournament leader, which we can talk about later, I guess, I now realize there's so much more going on than I ever could have suspected, even with you sharing a lot of your stories in these past years. I actually feel the need to apologize to you, and now I know what the real deal is. Just in summary, just so you guys know, a lot of people over the past decade have asked me, why don't I go back to EVO? I would love to see Phil go back to EVO. And there's multiple reasons why. First and primarily is that because I've moved on from being a competitive fighting game player. I don't really care about it anymore. As much as I do get the bug to play games at a competitive level and maybe win some matches and go back and play Super Turbo or something like that, it's not worth the amount of sacrifice that it takes, the amount of work I'd have to put into it, the money and time to go travel. You know what I mean? It's just not worth it. That's really the reason why you haven't seen me at EVO or tournaments or anything like that. But there's always been other reasons. Like, I knew that if ever I go back to EVO, I always face the chance that I'm going to kind of get treated unfairly behind the scenes, screwed over, put up against matchups that people know are ridiculous and not fair. It's ridiculous because there's always been this kind of hatred towards me in the community, and in particular with EVO staff, because of bad blood that happened years and years and years ago, that you would think by now would be exempt, but I really doubt it. At this point, there probably still would be shit that would go down behind the scenes, try to screw me over. So I really didn't care. I talked about this at length recently. All the controversy that's come out, Mr. Wizard, the allegations of his basically pedophiliac actions back 20 years ago at an arcade in California, and how basically everyone in the fighting game community kind of always knew the stories, but no one held him accountable for it until now, because one of his victims finally came out and admitted that, yeah, he basically stared at the guy's dick, which is fucked up because the kid was underage at the time. And then that, not only that, but then the fact that the canons, the people who own EVO behind the scenes, knew about this and didn't care, had Joey Queller or Mr. Wizard be the head of EVO for years and years and years, despite the fact that he was basically a scumbag behind the scenes back in the day. Don't know about modern day, and didn't care. Kind of swept it under the rug, didn't give a shit that any of it ever happened. And now EVO goes into their hands instead of Joey's, but it's like, but they knew all this, so how are they any better? So all that happening, and basically EVO falling apart, no EVO this year now because of all this going on. All right. Kind of gives a more interesting take on all the stuff I said about EVO over the years and the fact that I didn't want to go back to it and stuff. Just imagine you're getting into the fighting game community, the competitive fighting game community, and the first major tournament you go to that's not in your hometown, you get mistreated, you get cheated, you spent all this money, thousands of dollars to travel across the country just to get screwed, and the staff tells you they don't care. They just don't give a fuck. Tough shit, don't come back. That's the attitude we were given from these same guys who run EVO, you know. They always thought they were better than everyone else. They were, like, in charge because they were big wigs with money, and if you don't like it, it's their way or the highway. Tough shit, don't come back. That's what we were told repeatedly. You don't like what we do, don't come back. That's how it was, you know. So that's why he asked me, oh, Phil, you should just go back to EVO for old time's sake. Not only the fact that I don't really like the modern fighting games, but why would I go back to a place where that's how the attitude is, how it's always been? You know what I mean? So let's continue. He says, now for my question, okay? Do you mind people frequently asking you about your tournament days back in Street Fighter? Do you mind people asking you if you would ever enter another tournament? I'm just very entertained when you play any Street Fighter game. I'd love to see some sort of comeback to a tournament. Thanks for all of your content over the years. Do I mind it? No. And the thing is, you know, I get the feeling that there will always be that element. When you see me play Street Fighter 2, and you see me pulling off cool strategies and combos and things and just dominating, people are like, wow, I'd like to see Phil actually go in a competitive setting and play these games. But you know what I mean? Like, those days are in the past, and I gave them up purposely. I wanted to become a variety content creator. I wanted to go all in when I was a YouTube creator. Now I have a family and a life, and I really have no desire to sacrifice that to become a competitive player again. It would be a very concrete sacrifice. As of now, with what I do for a living, I feel I don't spend enough time with my family. I wish I had more time, more days off to spend with my wife and do stuff. Because right now we have 1 day a week we spend together. And outside of that, I saw her this morning, in the morning, before I started working on my stream. I just saw her for 5 minutes during my break, you know. I'll see her for dinner before she goes to work, and then I'll see her for like an hour before we go to sleep tonight. We don't get significant time on days that we're working. It's only our day off that we really get to spend any kind of significant time together. Now, can you imagine? Oh, I want to become a competitive player. Now I'm going to have to practice constantly. I'm going to have to travel and pay money. Like, holy shit, you know, it ain't worth it. It's seriously not worth it at all. So, for me, I don't think it would ever be something that's going to happen. Would I ever, on a whim, on a one-off, maybe go to a tournament and try to compete if it was a game that I really liked? It might happen. I'm not going to say it's completely and utterly off the table for the rest of my life that I'll never go play competitive Street Fighter in any capacity ever again. But it's certainly not a concern. It's not a consideration. It's not something that I would care about. Am I bothered when people ask me about it? No. It was part of my life. It was a major part of my early YouTube career when I was putting out constant fighting game coverage of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix, Street Fighter 4 and its various iterations. And I understand why people want that from me, and a lot of people, when a new fighting game comes out, get hyped. They want to see my coverage of the new fighting game, right? And I'm there with you. You remember when Mortal Kombat came out last year? I played the shit out of it. I really enjoyed it. When new games come out, I play them. The problem is right now there's nothing. There's nothing from Capcom to even fucking play. You know, when Street Fighter 6 come out, despite the fact if I like the game or not, you know I'm going to be playing it. I'm going to be covering every character, doing the story, playing it online. You know I'm going to do that. That's me. As a content creator and having a background in fighting games, I'm always going to enjoy doing that. But am I ever going to want to go back and play competitive fighting games again in any capacity? Probably not. But it may happen. Am I ever going to EVO? Probably not. Those motherfuckers don't want me back. They never wanted me back to begin with. And now that I've spoken out about Mr. Wizard and EVO, there's no fucking way they're ever going to want me back. They're petty people. They really are. They're petty people. And I know that if I went back, I would be treated unfairly. So I really don't ever see, unless EVO gets completely under new management, the canons, you know, have nothing to do with it whatsoever, you probably never see me back at EVO ever again. Ever. Maybe the one exception would be if I don't enter any official tournaments and I enter a side tournament for Super Turbo that has nothing to do, it's not run by EVO staff, maybe then I would consider it. But outside of that, that shit ain't gonna happen. Trust me, they know what I said on my stream. That's how they are. They probably were sent it by 1 million people. They watch it. Oh, motherfucker, he says that. It ain't worth it. RBG fan, cheers, and I'd like to see Phil beat up that Mr. Wizard guy. I don't want to beat up anyone in real life. Sorry. Okay, continuing on. All right. Polish Frog actually asked a lot of really good questions for this show. In fact, on the pre-stream today, I had people vote for what vest I would wear if we hit the vest goal, which, by the way, we're not even close, so maybe this is the end of the vest streak today. I have no idea at this point. It's very likely the way that's looking. But, basically, Polish Frog not only had a lot of good questions, but a lot of good suggestions. Thank you for that, Polish Frog. I really do appreciate that. Let's get on to his questions, okay? I didn't pick all of them. I think I picked maybe 1 or 2 of his questions. Let's see here. So he says, it's been about 2 years since YouTube kicked you in the balls with the Google Plus suspension and then AdSense issues that caused you to go all in on Twitch. A little bit of history on that. It was about the summer of 2018. YouTube screwed everything up. They were actually getting rid of Google Plus, but somehow in the process made it that Google Plus flagged my videos as spam, which makes no sense. I never wanted Google Plus integration with my YouTube channels. They forced it. It was literally mandatory to have a Google Plus integration. Then all of a sudden, as they were getting ready to shut down Google Plus, overnight they determined that all my videos were spam and they suspended my YouTube channel because of it. It's ludicrous. It made no fucking sense. Then I got all that fixed, but by the time I got it fixed, I couldn't enable ads on my channel anymore, so my whole channel was screwed up for like 2 months, okay? So, he says, what do you think about your decision to move to Twitch full-time in hindsight? Okay? Any regrets about the changes that you made on both YouTube and Twitch around that time, the summer of 2018? Do you feel that you actually made the right move, changing your archive content from the 10-minute recordings into 1-hour-long recordings, which is when I did it, was the summer of 2018? Has this led to you to be more focused on gameplay and stream chat compared to before, when you had to keep your eye on the timer to cut recordings every 10 minutes? Do you think that you'd ever start archiving your streams as a major 3.5 to 4 hour long video for an entire stream, and then a 2-hour video for the late stream? Or do you think that the hour-long recordings are a sweet spot for stream archives? Do you feel that going all in on Twitch and ditching YouTube has been a factor in the recent positivity that you've seen over the past year? Especially since Twitch hasn't given you anywhere near as many behind-the-scenes issues as YouTube has. And also, not to mention, Twitch as a platform has actual humans working for them there. They don't rely on bots to enforce their rules, so it didn't turn into an automated toxic cesspool like YouTube is. That's a lot of questions, all right? All right, let's address each one in order. First of all, the changes I made on YouTube, all right? My videos went from being, say, anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes long to basically a minimum of an hour, all right? What happened with that? Well, according to YouTube stats, engagement went up. What does that mean? It means that when you watch one of my videos, more people are watching it for a longer period of time. It used to be, some videos were watched for 30 seconds to a minute, people were out. Now the videos are longer, I guess engagement went up, okay? Actual interactions with the videos went up, meaning a video now gets way more likes, way more, things on it than it used to, okay? But you would think those things would have a positive impact, right? You would think, oh, when a video gets more engagement or gets more of these positive factors that YouTube apparently is weighing, then the video should get more attention. And according to YouTube and the way that they explain their methodology, the more positive interactions, the more engagement a video gets, it's higher in the rankings. You have a higher chance to be viewed by a wider audience, and it's a higher chance for it to show up in a sidebar if someone's watching other videos. Oh, here's related videos, okay? That's all fucking bullshit. I can tell you that right now. It's all bullshit. Putting my videos from 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour did nothing but hurt myself financially. Being very honest with all of you. Because here's what happened. I used to put out a video that's 15 minutes. That video would have maybe 2 ads, right? So if you watch an hour worth of gameplay, that's about 8 quick ads, and I would make a certain set amount of income on that. I put out a video now that's an hour long, that's supposed to have a certain amount of ads. Sometimes it'll have no ads. Sometimes it'll have a ridiculous amount of ads, like 20 ads. Now, I don't do that. That's all automated behind the scenes by YouTube. I have zero control over that. When I publish a video, YouTube just puts ads wherever the fuck they want, and I can't control that. Now, what I have the ability to do is every video that I upload to YouTube, after the fact, I can go back and take a look at what happened. Oh my God, this video has like 1 ad, it's an hour long. Oh my God, this video has 27 ads and it's an hour long. I can see that, and I have the ability to change that. In general, I just let it go. Whatever is on there, and I just let it go because it's not worth my time. I'd rather be focusing on being a live streamer and putting out quality streams for you guys than sitting behind the scenes on YouTube and adding ads, deleting ads, fucking with ads all day. I'm not an ad guy. I'm a content creator. I shouldn't be forced to do that because YouTube's system is inept. And it is. It always has been. YouTube can't decide anything to save their fucking life because it's all robots with terrible algorithms written by people who don't know what the fuck they're doing. It's always been like that. So it's funny because sometimes people tell me, I watched your whole playthrough, I didn't see a single ad. And then other times people are like, I couldn't even get through your video because there was 27 ads. I'm sorry. I wish I could control that. Unless I'm going to clone myself to sit there and fuck with ads all day on YouTube, I have no real control over it, and I don't have time to work on that. Okay? But what I can tell you is this. Summer of 2018, I changed my video format from being anywhere from 10 to 30 minute long videos instead to hour long videos. My revenue on YouTube went like this. Into the fucking shitter. That's why I basically had to 100% focus on being a live streamer, and I don't care about content I create for YouTube anymore because my ad revenue went from being my primary source of income to, all right, kind of like maybe 60% of my income to, all right, maybe 50% of my income to, all right, still about a third of my income to like not even 10%. That's how bad it got. It's just, and every month it's fucked up too. Like 1 month I'll put out more videos or play better games, views are sky high, and I make less money because YouTube can't sell the ad space because they suck at what they do. So it's ridiculously ludicrous how bad YouTube is. What I can tell you is this. All right? Luckily for me, I have turned things around. When I started being a full-time streamer, I told you my goal was to make it that my streams would be my focus and my streams would be my primary source of income. That is 100% accurate as of today. YouTube is kind of an afterthought. I don't put effort into what I put on YouTube. It's literally just cut up the streams, upload raw. I would never put effort into a YouTube video because there's no point. There's literally no point. YouTube fucked their business up so many times over the years and took all the control out of the content creator's hands that there's no point in me even trying. So everyone for years told me if you make longer videos, you'll get higher engagement. Your videos will be better on YouTube. You'll get more viewership. The complete opposite happened. My views tanked because I was making less videos. My ad revenue tanked because I was making less videos. And everything on YouTube went south since the summer of 2018 because of the supposedly positive changes I made and everyone told me to make. Literally backfired and did the opposite. Thank God I was able to adjust my streams to become as popular and profitable as they have, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here anymore. Okay? Now, is it easier now because I don't have to make, take track of the length of every video and basically say, oh, I have to stop the recording, start the recording every 15 minutes to 30 minutes. Yeah, that was annoying. And it became something natural that I did over the years. I had this almost like a natural timer in my head. I could tell when it was about 15 minutes or when it was about 30 minutes. I don't have to do that anymore. Every hour, I just stop and start the video again, which is pretty easy to do. It's much easier in that regard, for sure. Would I ever start archiving my streams as one video? Like, let's say Ask the King would be one video for YouTube. Right? No. And here's why. Even though that would make it super easy for me, now I don't have to split it up at all, YouTube has major problems with the longer a video is. Okay? The longer a video, YouTube just constantly has issues. If you have a video that's over an hour, you exponentially increase the failure rate of YouTube to actually be able to process that video in a normal time frame and put it live. If I made Ask the King one video and I uploaded it, I wouldn't be surprised if it's stuck in YouTube processing for a day and didn't go live for an extended period of time, or just air it out entirely, because YouTube has issues with long videos, always has. It's gotten better for sure. The hour-long videos seem to always work now, which is good. But every once in a while, a problem creeps up its ugly head, and then a video gets screwed up, and I have to re-upload it a bunch of times. But the few times when I would make a video longer than an hour, I just seriously think it's not worth it. It's terrible, I'm just not gonna bother doing it. It's too much of a risk factor of me having to upload, re-upload. Oh, now it's just not working at all. Split the video in a video editor and re-upload. I'm just not gonna do. I'll do like I said, the hour-long videos is kind of the sweet spot for me right now. Okay. Do I feel like going all in on Twitch and ditching YouTube was a major factor in the recent positivity that I've seen over the past year, especially because Twitch doesn't give me any problems behind the scenes like YouTube does, and Twitch has a platform with humans who work there? Yes, and the thing is, like I said, doing this kind of content, interactive content with you guys on stream, I feel is way more meaningful, and in reality, I enjoy doing this way more than the content I used to put out, and I just love it. I love being here. It's a different mentality. On YouTube, it was kind of like, whenever I put out a video for like many years there, I'd say probably the years 2015 through 2017, whenever I put out a video, it was shit on the video, tell Philly's terrible, harass Phil, and now I can put in an environment where it's not like that. Are there people who razz me all the time? Of course. And it's fine, I run with the memes or whatever, but in general, it's not about 100% Phil's a piece of shit and we're just here to basically destroy him and make him feel like he's a worthless human and, make his day miserable. Instead, people actually want to hang out with me, have fun interaction. It's good in that regard. And you're right. Unlike YouTube, you got an issue on Twitch. I have contacts I can reach out to get the issue addressed within a reasonable amount of time. But just in general, I haven't had any issues. Like, when you really think about it, I think Twitch changed their rules or whatever in early 2018. And yeah, I got suspended like twice. And after that, it's been 2.5 years. I haven't had to speak to a single person at Twitch staff. Not a single person. I've had no issues, nothing that I need to work with them on, because I just do my thing. I don't break the rules, and they ignore all the insane, stupid, false reports against me, and I never have an issue, you know? So, I love it. I love being here on Twitch, and yeah, I do feel that the positivity towards me is a direct factor is because I became a full-time live streamer rather than a content creator on YouTube. I don't think that ever would have been possible on YouTube. I'm serious. I feel like I reinvented myself in the last 3 years, and this never would have happened on YouTube. It would not have been possible. The toxicity would have always continued on YouTube no matter what I tried. Silent Bob just tipped me $37. Thank you very much, Silent Bob, for the biggest tip of the day. A very generous tip. Let's get that up on the leaderboard. And that's going to propel us to being more than halfway to the tips goal. We're now at $61 in tips for the day. Thank you very much for that, Silent Bob. It's good to see you. And thank you for helping us to try to at least, you know, make some headway on the tips goal there. It's amazing. Dooley258 just subscribed for 53 months. Dooley, holy shit. That's what? Like 5+ years of support? Thank you, Dooley, for the ongoing long-term support. I appreciate that. It's good to see you. Guys, please give me a second. I feel like I'm about to sneeze. I want to use a tissue. Give me a second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. My allergies this year have been pretty bad on and off, and sometimes my air conditioner turns on, and it just, oh god, I gotta sneeze so bad. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Okay, let's continue, everyone. Now we're actually going to move on to Twitter questions for the second half of this video. I don't know if we're going to get through all the Twitter questions. We'll see. Okay, so the first question is from Vicente. He says, would you, The Last of Us 2 or Death Stranding, which one would you prefer and why? Now, that's an interesting question, okay? That's a really interesting question. And the reason I like that question is because you've got two games that are almost in completely opposite situations, all right? First of all, when you look at The Last of Us Part 2 as well as Death Stranding, the one thing that both games did well was the graphics and the actual, like, world design of each game. I think that each one of those did outstanding, that they hit the mark when it came to, you know, level design, things you were traversing looked gorgeous. The character models and everything in the games looked absolutely amazing. And the graphics overall, just in general, of those games were outstanding, right? I mean, we can all admit that. I don't think anyone's going to say, nah, the games look terrible. But they were complete polar opposites when it came to what was good and bad about each game. So the Death Stranding was a game where most of the gameplay mechanics of the game were very basic. Basic third-person shooter style gameplay. There were a few elements in there that felt kind of like Metal Gear, admittedly. But it was mostly about traversing mountainous regions or rocky regions, getting through them and delivering packages, okay? Not the most riveting gameplay. Was there gameplay with combat and everything? There was, but it was kind of secondary to just walking from point A to point B, using vehicles to drive from point A to point B, building bridges, that kind of stuff. Not the best gameplay. Were there some boss fights? Yes, the boss fights were kind of the more refreshing parts of the game. But even then, all right, even then, when it comes to, I got to ban someone because they're spamming copy pasta because they're a brain-dead fucking idiot. I had to get rid of them, okay? Even then, when it comes to the boss fights, they were more simplistic. They weren't very challenging or interesting. In a lot of cases, they were just kind of interjected to feel like, oh, there's some variety in the game. But the primary gameplay of Death Stranding, boring. But one of the best stories of this console generation, for sure, if not the last 10 years, a completely original work. Was it weird? Absolutely. But was it entertaining? Yeah. Kojima did an amazing job with the story of that game. I like that story a lot. That story will resonate with me for a long time because it was lengthy and drawn out, had all these mystery questions that were answered. By the end of the game, all the loose ends were tied up. You had characters, you didn't know who they were, then they get revealed. Oh my God, what a twist and all of that. And in my opinion, the game's story was absolutely outstanding. I loved it. Every moment of it. And I was sad when the game would push me into a gameplay segment that felt like it was boring and drawn out. Now, the gameplay was made that way for a reason. The whole point of the game was a long journey and stuff like that, and the connections between people. It was meant to be like that. The gameplay was purposely made to have segments that felt like they were long, arduous, and boring. But the overall work of art, when you look at Death Stranding, was entertaining, to say the least. It was a really good game when you looked at it, when you got to the end of that story. Like, wow, I toughed through the parts that were kind of arduous and tedious, and maybe this game could have been a lot better if the gameplay was better. But man, it was a wild ride, and I'm happy I played it. At the end of the day, you feel like, wow, that was a great story, man. It was worth the trip. The Last of Us Part 2 is the complete opposite. Although it has insane character models that are great, and it has a great graphics and all of that, and great world design, the gameplay is insanely improved from The Last of Us Part 1 to the point where the whole sneaking, survival, looting, solving puzzles, platforming aspect of the game, the exploration aspect of the game, leaps and bounds better than the first game. The actual just gameplay of the game is fun, much better than the first game. Although a lot of people might say, well, the first game had more run and gun. That is true. This game made the gunplay much more difficult, but at the same time, you had other elements that made that gameplay better. There was a really cool boss fight that I absolutely enjoyed in Last of Us Part 2. So, gameplay, sky-high improvement, right? Like technical achievement, even. But then you look at the story, and it's like, the story, sadly, is not well written. It's timed very poorly with flashback jumps and time lapses. Playing as one character during one timeline, then playing as another character aside from the same timeline and splitting it up instead of being in chronological order just makes it frustrating and confusing. The characters are not likable for a lot of people. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but for me, the characters are just not likable because of the way that they're developed and set up. A lot of the characters from the first game don't even act like the same people as the first game. They retcon things about their personalities and things. It's just a mess. The story is a fucking mess. And when you have a game like that, most people enjoyed The Last of Us Part 1 for the story, and then, my God, the great graphics and the gameplay were just the icing on the delicious cake that was the complete game. In this game, it's like delicious, amazing chocolate frosting on top of a shit sundae. You know? I don't want to eat the shit sundae. In fact, I even said to people, if ever there's a Last of Us Part 3, which I almost guarantee you, there's going to be a Last of Us Part 3 because the game sold so well, I will skip every cutscene if I replay The Last of Us Part 2. I'm not exaggerating. Like, I just hated the story so much that I will play the game, but every time there's a cutscene, skip, till I get to the next part of the gameplay. Because the gameplay was great and the graphics were great. I will have to replay it again and re-experience the gameplay. I don't care about the story. It's terrible. It's a piece of shit. And I would, you know what I mean? That's the deal for me. So, when I'm looking, and you ask me, Last of Us Part 2 or Death Stranding, I would replay Death Stranding in its entirety again. If I had a choice between the two games, I would replay Death Stranding in its entirety again before I would replay The Last of Us Part 2 in its entirety again. I would. I would go through the arduous, tedious, annoying shit, and maybe the second time around try to learn how the stupid pulley system or whatever it was worked, which I ignored the first playthrough. I would maybe try to do things differently, and I would probably thoroughly enjoy the story a second time around. I would not want to play The Last of Us Part 2 in its entirety ever again. I just don't ever want to see those cutscenes one more fucking time. I would bear through the arduous tediousness of the gameplay of of Death Stranding again before I would watch that horrible writing and those terrible fucking plot of Last of Us Part 2 again. So, Death Stranding, thumbs up. Last of Us Part 2, thumbs down in that regard. The head-to-head battle, Kojima wins. He did a better job in my opinion. He did. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I received a $39 anonymous tip. We hit the tips goal, guys. Let's update everything. And so the people on the pre-stream used a new system today by which they use their channel points or penne points to vote early on what vest I would be wearing, and the vest that won out was the Platinum Vest. So I'm going to put on the Platinum Vest per the request of the viewers earlier today. We're now up to $100 in tips. Thank you for the support, everyone. 175. That means we're halfway to the 200 vest goal and the next Vestival celebration. Let me get the vest on, and then we'll continue. Okay. Vestige achieved. Alright, guys. Ponage 101 resubscribed for 24 months. That's 2 years of support from Ponage. And he says, 2 years, we're sharing the sub anniversary. Awesome. Thank you, Ponage, for the ongoing support. I appreciate that. Only Iced Coffee gifted a sub to Human Milk. Congratulations, Human Milk, and thank you, Iced Coffee, for the support. Alice Telemon did a 50-bit cheer. He says, you were fully ready to not hit the streak today. However, we were not. Booyah. Thank you for that nice statement and the support, Atlas Telemon. And Only Iced Coffee gifted a sub to Mocking Bird. Congratulations, Mocking Bird. Again, thank you, Only Iced Coffee. All right, let's continue. Snow White asked the following question. As a person that's a versatile gamer, you've played every genre of games. So my question is, what's your opinion on decision-based games where your choices decide how the story unfolds, and why do you think they're not so popular or get recognition like most other games? What this person is describing is basically the Telltale model of game, where it's kind of choose your own adventure, narrative choices or quick time event choices that you make determine how the game unfolds. I honestly think that they're not as popular for 2 reasons, all right? The first reason is a lot of these games are bait and switch, meaning it says that your choices matter. Oh, you know, Clementine will remember that. Clementine will remember that choice you made. In reality, it doesn't matter. Like, a lot of these games pretend like their choice matters, but they all steer you towards the same narrative end anyway. Maybe there's a slight nuance in the way that one thing is done versus another, the person who comes with you, the way that you do it. But if the resolution and ending is exactly the same, then did your choices really matter during that supposed choose-your-own-adventure game? No. Not at all. It's the illusion of choice to just end you at the same destination anyway. So I think a lot of people kind of realized that over the years. At first, when Telltale Games were making these games, people bought into it, and then they kind of realized, wait a minute, if you do this choice or this choice, it's the same anyway. That's kind of messed up. So because of that, a lot of people just stopped caring about those games. There was also a massive oversaturation of the market of those games for a several-year period. I say about 4 or 5 years there, where Telltale was putting out way too many. You had Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, Tales from the Borderlands, Game of Thrones, Batman 1 and 2, right? All coming out within like a year. You're like, what the fuck? Like, how am I supposed to play all those? You know? And that's the thing, is like, it just got oversaturated to the point where people stopped caring about that style of game, and Telltale went out of business because of that. Now, the other factor here, I feel, is value for your dollar and the perceived value of one of those games. If you play a game like that, you're going to probably play it through once, right? And you're going to really enjoy it the first time through that you play it. But then, is there really any replayability for playing it a second time? A Telltale game, almost never. The Telltale games almost always, if not always, have the same resolution. It doesn't matter what you chose. It's the same ending no matter what. Therefore, there's zero replayability. Maybe you'll see a slightly different cutscene here or there, but what was the point? With games like, I would say, from the people who made, I forget the name of it, David Cage, when he makes games like Beyond Two Souls, or Detroit Become Human, or, you know, Heavy Rain. Those games actually have concrete changes that can happen in the plots and stuff, depending on what you choose. People can die at various points. The outcome of the game can actually change at the end. And at least with those games, you replay it at least another time just to see the differences in your choices. So at least there's some replayability there. But in general, games as a whole have become longer and more lengthy and had more content to them in recent years. If you haven't noticed, in the past 5 years, this console generation is now, these consoles can have more capacity and more processing power. Every game's open world, and every game is 50 hours long. Sadly, there's perception out there that if you make one of these choice-based games, plot-based games, the game's only 5 hours long, and you play it once, maybe you replay it one more time, and you rush through it, so you got 8 hours out of a game. See what I mean? The perceived value is much lower. Now, for me, being a versatile gamer who's played all these different types of games, I can tell you, I've had just as much enjoyment with a franchise like The Walking Dead from Telltale Games as I've had with a 50-hour open-world action-based game or RPG. But a lot of people don't see it that way. They just, it's apples to apples, 50 hours to 7 hours. It's not the same. Therefore, this game's better than this one. And I do feel that, sadly, that is kind of an unfair justification to make. I do feel there is still a place in the gaming market for this kind of game. I mean, last year we had Man of Medan. Later this year in October, we're going to have Little Hope. At least we got the horror-style choose-your-own-adventure game that's coming out still, and they're still continuing on. Apparently, they're selling enough that the franchise continues. That's great, because I like that. I don't want to see every single game franchise, like the David Cage games, the games from those horror game makers. I don't want to see those games go away because people now have perceived value in the length of a game, and because the games aren't lengthy, they're not going to buy them anymore. So for me, I think there's a way for it, or a place for it, and a way for those games to be popular. I do, and I hope to see them continue. But I think that, sadly, there's just these judgments that people make about those style of games that are kind of unfair. Or it could be, you know, again, their value they see in a game is length. And if those games usually are not very long, the value is not there, and they're going to skip them. And that's why people kind of don't hold them in the same high regard. Okay? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our second break of the stream. So if you're watching live on stream, it's going to be about a 10-minute break right now. If you're watching on YouTube, this is the end of part 2. When we come back with part 3, we'll finish up the Twitter questions, and then we're going to open forum for people on the stream to ask some questions to end the show. So thank you so far, everyone, for all of your support. I really do appreciate that a lot. And I will see you right after this break. Thanks. See you in a bit.